Hello. Welcome everyone to the 10th annual Social Justice Speaker Series. We're going to start our webinar and live in-person sessions shortly. So until then, enjoy your pizza. It looks like the folks in front of us have pizza, and we'll begin our presentation shortly. Thank you.
Last year, and we've been so fortunate to bring forth world-renowned public health professionals, historians, political and social scientists, clinicians, and advocates together to help us really understand and address the important intersections of public health and social justice, and to discuss the strategies for advocating and transforming systems to create more equitable society and world. And before we start today's webinar, we want to really pause and reflect that we still do sit on stolen land here, even in Vallejo, which is the home of Touro University, California. We sit on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Confederate villages of the Lejeune, Carquin, Mawekma, and the Patwin peoples. We also know that it's important to pause and remember that our country is built on the labor of enslaved people who were kidnapped and brought to the US from the African continent. And we recognize the continued contribution of our survivors. And we acknowledge that all immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples who have contributed to building this country and continue to serve within our labor force. And we know more than ever how important it is to understand and acknowledge and be able to, as Dr. Kalafala mentioned, to understand and embody what that means in terms of our mission as students, as professionals, as residents in the society in which we live. As we do this work, it's our collective responsibility to pause and critically understand these histories, to repair the harm that has impacted generations, and to honor, protect, and sustain this land. We have a message from our provost, Dr. Tammy Hendricks, that I'd like to share before we get started. She was unable to be with us here tonight, so please bear with me while I pull her up. Let's see. Pull that over. Here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Tammy Hendricks, and I'm the Interim Chief Academic Officer of Touro University, California, and the Dean of our College of Osteopathic Medicine. I'm honored to join in celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Touro Social Justice and Public Health Speaker Series. For me, social justice means ensuring that every individual, regardless of their background, has equal access to health, opportunities, and support systems. It's about standing up for equity and making sure that every voice is heard and valued. This series has been instrumental in bringing these values to life by educating, inspiring, and empowering our community. Through thought-provoking discussions and insights from remarkable speakers, we've been able to explore and address the crucial issues facing public health today. A huge thank you to Dr. Gail Cummings and everyone on our public health team for making this series possible. Congratulations on 10 impactful years, and here's to many more. Let's continue working together toward a healthier, more just world. Thank you.
I know she would have appreciated having been here, but we appreciate her support and her thoughtful words. As we mentioned, we have a new, different theme every year. We are so excited about this year's theme, commercial and economic drivers of health and justice. This year, we're covering critical issues like the food industry, the fossil fuels, the prison industrial complex, and of course, tonight's topic, the tobacco industry. And as you will hear tonight, our discussion will focus on the economic drivers behind the tobacco industry and its continued impact on public health. And who can tell me why this is an important discussion on today? What's important about today? Yay, right. It's the Great American Smokeout. Yeah, and this was just by chance, right? Right. I don't know that we necessarily planned it, but it's a good reminder as I went down and met Dr. Phillip Gardiner. There was a lot of smoking going on, right, in the parking lot, and it engulfed the cars, right? And anyway, it's an important reminder of these issues. And on this campus, I have to say the public health program was the first, we were the first to kind of institute a non-smoking policy here on campus. And that was about 10 years ago with the support and direction of Dr. Annette Alberg, who's in our Community Action for Health concentration. So we've been out at this work for a long time. So tonight we're going to take a deep dive into these issues with two leading experts in the field, Doctors Pamela Ling and Dr. Phil Gardiner, to help mark this occasion and help us celebrate our collective commitment to advancing social justice and public health. And without further ado, I want to bring out Dr. Wilson, who will do some housekeeping to kick us off and get started.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for your patience. As you all know here, that this is a course. And if you all are familiar with that music, aren't you? Every week. So if you are a student, please be aware that you have your things that you need to complete after today's session. For those of you who are online who are interested in continuing medical education, please see the information on the screen. You can sign in during the session for continuing medical education and also for continuing public health education. There are also links available as well. Today, as Dr. Cummings already mentioned, we will be covering tobacco industry as a commercial determinant. And our hope is that you will take this into your clinical practice and into your public health practice and to be well informed. Also, we are offering micro-credential and badges for those of you in our audience on Zoom who are interested in receiving credit or adding this information to your LinkedIn or other social media account. So now I'd like to introduce Dr. Phillip Gardiner. Let's see. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to everything here. Oops. Where are the spots? All right. Sorry about that, Dr. Phil. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Phil Gardiner. He's a public health activist, administrator, and evaluator, and researcher with over 25 years of experience. His work has focused on health disparities, particularly within African American communities, and the impact of smoking and tobacco use. Dr. Gardiner has worked on a variety of studies on diseases such as hypertension, diabetes, and cancer. For the past 20 years, he has lectured nationwide on health disparities and menthol smoking in Black communities. Dr. Gardiner recently retired as the Senior Program Officer for the Tobacco-Related Disease Research Program at the University of California Office of the President, a position he held for over 25 years. He is also the co-chair of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, a group dedicated to combating the tobacco epidemic in African American communities, both locally and nationally. We are excited to hear from Dr. Gardiner tonight. Please join me in welcoming him. I'd also like to add, as he may not, that he's had recent articles in both the New York Times and Washington Post, highlighting the need and necessity to continue his work.
Thank you, and good evening all. No. Well, let me also just say for all of you, I was a teacher here at Touro from 2008 to I retired in 2020. I used to teach in this building often, and so it's a little coming home experience. Is this me? Can folks hear me? How do I advance the slides? I figured it out on my own. So good evening, and thank you for having me. I know I don't want to take a lot of time. I'm going to do a deep dive. My colleague, Pam, is going to do a broader exploration. In fact, we probably needed to have two sessions, one on each of these topics. But I'm going to do a deep dive historically into African Americans and menthol cigarettes. I'm suggesting to you that what we're talking about is the African Americanization of menthol cigarettes. If you take anything away from what I present today, it's this slide. In 1952, only 5% of African Americans smoked menthol cigarettes. By 1968, that had almost tripled to 14%. By 1976, that had tripled again to 44%. By the mid-2000s, it had grown to 82%. To today, that over 85% of African Americans smoke menthol cigarettes. Where did this come from? How did this happen? Why menthol? Why African Americans? I want you guys to ask me that at the end of this, and then, or when we ever have that chance to do that. Why is this an important public health issue? It's a great article by Mendez and Lee. Menthol damage to African Americans between 1980 and 2018. Menthols were responsible for 1.5 million new smokers, 157,000 smoking-related premature deaths, and 1.5 million years of lost among African Americans. African Americans only constitute 12% of the US population, but these figures represent staggering 15%, 41%, and 50% of the total menthol-related harm. This has been concentrated harm. The main killer of people around the world are tobacco products. The main killer of Black folks who smoke are tobacco products, and the main product they use is menthol. I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about where that came from. This is an ad. Now, I didn't put all the ads in here because we don't have time to do all the ads. This is an ad from the late 60s, early 70s of selling menthol in the Black community. Here's a brother with an afro, dashiki, beads. Cool ain't cold, Newport is. This is supposed to resonate with our community. And in fact, unfortunately, it did, as those figures show. This is the mid-1970s. Alive with pleasure, Newport. After all, if smoking isn't a pleasure, why bother? Here's a brother in a suit and a tie playing basketball. Well, black folks play basketball. Of course, they don't smoke menthols, but that's a different issue. Next slide. By the late 1970s, Winston gets in the game with real rich and cool. Look at this. This is on purpose. This is an ad for Newport. What is the ad mocking? The picture on the right, it's on your right too. The picture on the right is Jim Crow. The picture on the left is a Newport cigarette. Notice the note doesn't say alive with pleasure. Now it just says pleasure. Jim Crow was pleasurable, as you know. Here it is, Newport. This is from 2013, 2012. They don't even have to say pleasure anymore. They just have to say Newport. Predation. The action of attacking or plundering where a predator, the tobacco industry in this case, feeds on its prey, the African American community and other marginalized groups. A sister came out of the tobacco industry, brought documents with her, and gave it to the tobacco control movement back in 2004, 2005. We actually incorporated it in our work by 2009. We knew back then, even 20 years ago and before, that the tobacco industry thought there were focused communities and there were non-focused communities. Focused communities were inner city, colored, and poor. Non-focused communities were upscale, suburban, rural, and white. This is their documentation. This is the tobacco industry. Menthol cigarettes are cheaper in focused communities. We actually have some data on that. It's my colleague at Stanford, Lisa Henriksen, great study, predatory marketing. If you ever thought there wasn't predatory marketing, you saw that line went up, the first slide I showed you. As the percentage of African-American students increased, the proportion of menthol ads increased. What they did is look at the distribution of African-American students in California. And where there were greater African-American students in enrollment, the amount of menthol marketing increased. There is a dose-response relationship. Tobacco industry is watching this the whole time. Newport promotions were 42% higher, and the cost of Newports were 12 cents lower. It's outrageous. And this was in California. This is Massachusetts. And comparing Brookline, which is a more affluent white part of Brooklyn, and Dorchester, which was a more dark. It used to be mainly black. It's very diverse, but very poor in color. The punchline here is that there are more retail ads in Dorchester. The ads were larger in Dorchester. The menthol ads were off the chart greater in Dorchester. And I guess what pisses me off the most, pack of cigarettes was 50 cents cheaper. So in the most poorest place, the people that are being exploited the most, you want to make sure they die from this project. We actually have national figures on that, and we're not going to do that this afternoon. This is one of my favorite slides. Menthol as a sacrificial lamb. Many of you should be aware that the Family Smoking Prevention Tobacco Control Act that was proposed in 2008 and passed in 2009 essentially was a deal with the devil. It was a deal cut by Phillip Morris, Southern senators, representatives from the tobacco control movement, and some members of the Congressional Black Caucus. It eliminated 13 flavors in all cigarettes and only left in one, and that was menthol. You might ask yourself why they did that. By doing that, they essentially threw under the bus African Americans. Women disproportionately smoke these products. Youth disproportionately smoke these products. Native Hawaiians, Filipinos, folks from the LGBTQ community, Puerto Ricans, folks with behavioral health issues. I could go on. People on the edges, on the margins of the society have always been marketed with this trash. That's why they left it on the market. And there's also an economic incentive going on. Sorry. Did I do that? I did that. So let me just say, a lot of times this gets skipped over, and I don't want to skip over it. So what is menthol? What it does. Menthol is an anesthetic by definition. It is the chief constituent of peppermint oil. It has a cooling sensation, activates taste buds, and allows for deeper inhalation. The deeper you inhale, the more addicted you become. The more addicted you become, the harder it is to quit. Mentholated cigarette smoking inhibits nicotine metabolism. When nicotine gets into your liver, it becomes cotinine. And if there's menthol in your liver with the cigarette smoke, menthol slows down the metabolizing. It stays in your liver longer. It stays in your body longer. Independence, these are great words, independent sensory activation of neurotransmitters. Punchline, if there's menthol in the smoke, it activates nicotine receptors in your brain more effectively than if there isn't menthol in it. That's why it's harder to quit. It increases salivary flow and transbutyl drug absorption. If you chew tobacco with menthol in it, it crosses the gum barrier much more effectively. These new pouches that Pam's going to talk about, and they have menthol in them, they cross the gum barrier much more effectively. And probably most problematic is greater cell permeability. When you smoke a cigarette that has menthol in the smoke, it passes the gum, it penetrates the cell barrier much more effectively than if it didn't have it. Now you're going to get really mad. Well, that's the slide after this one. What's interesting about what I'm telling you, this is a conference that was done in 1993, this data I'm showing you. This is a conference of the tobacco industry. Drum roll, menthol is in all cigarette products, not just in Cools and Newports and like that. It's in Camels and in all these other places too. It's in pipe tobacco, it's in chewing tobacco. In fact, there's a rule in front of the FDA now that says they want to eliminate menthol as a characterizing flavor. We argue, the tobacco control folks, they should be removed as an ingredient. And there's a great paper by your friend, Pamela, showing that even the subliminal effects of menthol will still produce the things that I talked to you about earlier. I mentioned the racial difference in cotinine clearance. It clears much faster in whites. The half-life is longer in blacks. And then this last thing, that there's more nicotine. What we found in looking at studies, they put different amounts of nicotine in different menthol cigarettes around the world. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But when we took the study, and I used to work with Eliseo Perez Estable in 1998, that menthol cigarettes had greater concentrations of nicotine also. See, how do you say this? There's a symbiotic relationship between menthol and nicotine. You can lower the nicotine level, and if you raise the menthol level, you're going to get the same hit in the jaw. It's going to affect the same receptor. Tobacco industry knows this. This is where we learned all this from, is from the tobacco industry. Hi there. I didn't see you come in. Okay. Is that him? Yeah, no, that's him. Okay. Sorry, friends. Melanin and nicotine. Melanin is a substance that gives color to our skin. A lot of colored folks in the audience, yes. Nicotine is stored in tissues that contain melanin. The darker your skin means the more nicotine is stored in your body. Stop for a minute. Penetrates walls better, stays in your body longer, harder to get rid of. They knew what they were doing. They're still doing it. A number of us are fighting to get rid of it. It's too bad I can't go into all the fighting. I'm going to move on. Menthols are harder to quit. Folks who smoke menthol cigarettes try more often, but fail more often. We have data, and I always keep this. I know Levi, and I've known him for years, and that's why I use this slide. This is still true today. This is still true today. They try more often, and they fail more often. In June of 2020, after a lot of fights, We got partial victories in Chicago. We got stuff done in San Francisco and California. My group, the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, sued the FDA for dragging their feet on not getting rid of menthol when they got rid of all these other products. And you saw what I just showed you. They should have got rid of this in the first place. We are joined by our colleagues at Action on Smoking and Health, American Medical Association, and the National Medical Association. They finally passed an act in 2021. The good is they started the rulemaking process. It included also flavored little cigars. The bad, that said it would take a year before they made the rule public. The ugly, we know the tobacco industry will probably sue more than once. Problem even with this slide, and I did this slide a year ago, is that when they finally promulgated the rule in 2022, they said they would put it out in August of 2023. August of 2023 came and went. They said they would put it out in December of 2023. December of 2023 came and went. They said they would put it out in March of 2024. March of 2024 came and went. Where are we today? There are two states that ban menthol, Massachusetts and California. There are 109 cities that have explicit menthol provisions. There's other cities that have flavor restrictions, but don't include menthol. These are the countries that have outlawed menthol. There should be an asterisk by Brazil. Brazil is still in court today. The suit was filed in 2013. Today is 2024 to block the implementation of the law. That law has been blocked, and they're still producing stuff. And to add insult to injury, the menthol rule that is passed by the FDA is still sitting on Biden's desk and has been sitting there for over a year. In the course of all this, they said, well, let's get rid of menthol. We're going to introduce non-menthol menthols. These are all over California now. The day that California passed their law in November of 2022, and there were some court cases, blah, 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 December 16th, it went into effect. On December 16th, these became available in stores all throughout California. They're still aiming them at African Americans. Nothing has changed here. The non-menthol menthols are using a cooling agent called WS3. It has a cooling cessation similar to what happens with menthol. Its cellular receptors, it sticks to the same receptors, the TRPM8 and the TRPA1. The slides will be made available. You can click on it and kind of look at all of this stuff yourself. Intense cooling. The companies have bypassed menthol bans. Smoking initiation continues with these products, and it's going to be put in other tobacco products like the nicotine pouches that we'll talk about later. Enough. My take-home message is this, that menthol is a social justice issue. The disproportionate marketing and targeting of candy-flavored poisons to African Americans and other specially oppressed sectors of our society is outright discriminatory and genocidal. Straight up. The folks who are the poorest, least informed, folks with the fewest resources, indeed the definition of preying on the most sectors of our society. If menthol were banned, hundreds of thousands of lives would be saved. If only 30% of the people who quit, and not 70, not 80%, if only 30% quit, over 500,000 lives would be saved. Over 250,000 of them would be African Americans. So what's at stake? It's our future. It's our children. Here's a brother on his skateboard in baggy pants, hat backward, surrounded by tobacco imagery. That's what's at stake. With that, I'm going to stop. Thank you, and I'll take some questions later.
Thank you so much.
That was a lot.
It was a lot, but we definitely need this information and a wonderful foundation for our next presentation. Dr. Cummings, I'd like for you to introduce Dr. Pamela Ling.
Got distracted because that very cute little boy over there was distracting everybody. It's now my honor to introduce Dr. Pamela Ling, a renowned researcher and professor of medicine at UCSF. Dr. Ling has focused much of her work on the tobacco industry marketing strategies and their specific targeting of vulnerable populations, including young adults, women, and racial and ethnic minorities. Dr. Ling's work is grounded in her analysis of previously secret tobacco industry documents, which detail the marketing strategies of the that the tobacco industry uses to target at-risk groups. Her research aims to use these marketing strategies to improve tobacco control programs and reduce smoking rates. Dr. Ling has clinical expertise in the general and general and internal medicine with a focus on underserved urban populations. We are privileged to have Dr. Ling with us tonight to share her insights on tobacco, the tobacco industry and practices, and their impact on public health. Please help me join in welcoming Dr. Pamela Ling.
Thank you. Let's put this. Hey, you guys. Can you hear me? No? How about now? Better? Here come the slides. Ooh. Okay, and we just click to advance. All right, let's see. All right, I can see the clock over there. Okay, thanks very much. So Dr. Phil has just taken you guys with the deep dive into menthol. My talk is a little bit broader. This series also talked about the tobacco and the alcohol industries. So I'm going to include a little bit of material that looks at places where the tobacco and alcohol companies kind of touch together. I did want to acknowledge my collaborators. A lot of the work I'm going to show you was done by teams of people. I also wanted to give a shout out to 2 resources where if you ever have to do a presentation and you need ads from the tobacco companies and you want to put them in your presentation, the Trinkets and Trash website or this Stanford website called Stanford Research into the Impact of Tobacco Advertising, or SRITA, are huge archives of tobacco ads. They're free. They have been put there for public use for education. And you'll see lots of ads in my presentation from there. So you could do that too. So I've studied tobacco marketing for about 20 years. This group is so young, you may not know this, but it's because one reason to do it is because tobacco companies are really good at what they do, right? They have to convince people to take up a product that kills half the people who use it, right? How do you do that? They're also really, really part of American culture, and tobacco brands feel natural. Can anyone tell just looking at this color what brand of cigarettes this color stands for? Right, very good. If I just showed you this, right? This image, there's no brand on it, there's no logo on it. People see this image, they know, right? It's Marlboro cigarettes. This is the full ad. This just shows how good the industry is at being able to evoke their brand just by showing you a color. The second reason why I study tobacco marketing is because there is a free data source. And this data source is free to you too. This is the Industry Documents Library at UCSF. We have the world's largest collection of previously secret industry documents. So Dr. Phil talked about, I'm not sure if he did, but anyways, the tobacco companies were taken to court by the attorneys general years ago and charging them with knowing about the health effects of cigarettes, knowing about marketing to kids, knowing that nicotine was addictive, and lying about that to the public. And as part of the settlements of those cases, the industry had to agree to put their secret documents from inside the corporations on the web so that the public could see them. What UCSF Library has done is take all those documents from the tobacco industry websites and put them in a public archive that's freely searchable. And we have over 100 million pages now. So if you go on, if you just Google like industry documents at UCSF, you can find this website. You just put any term you want into the search bar and you can pull up documents from tobacco executives talking about that topic. That's something I've been doing for about 20 years. It's free, but it takes a lot of time. This is an example of a tobacco industry document. This is from Lorillard Tobacco Company, the makers of the Newport ads that you saw. And this is an example of a document where internally, like externally, the tobacco company said, we had no idea that kids would like these cigarettes, right? We didn't target African-American people, it just happened. But internally, this memo shows they're saying, Newport's doing great. Our cigarettes purchased by Black people, young adults, and the base of our business is the high school students, right? So documents like this, internal to the tobacco companies, talking about marketing to kids made it really hard for them to argue in court that they had no idea that, you know, kids would find menthol cigarettes appealing, let's say. So this is an example of a document from the tobacco industry. I'm going to show you some results of some work we've done studying the documents. So one of the topics I thought I would give as an example is tobacco and alcohol pairing. If you talk to other young people or when in my studies, people will tell you smoking and drinking goes together like milk and cookies, right? Like peanut butter and jelly. They're just naturally paired. But actually, the tobacco companies knew this, and a lot of tobacco marketing actually reinforces the association between smoking and drinking. When I have patients who are trying to quit smoking, they tell me they have to stop drinking, because if they have one drink, they're going to relapse and start smoking again. That association is so strong. We also know that tobacco companies used to own alcohol companies. So Philip Morris Tobacco Company also owned Miller Beer for a long time. And so that created opportunities for them to market both products, both tobacco and alcohol. And then we did also a study looking at how the tobacco industry reached out to the alcohol industry to try to push policy. This is an example of our marketing. This is our marketing paper. And here we just went into the documents to find out, what did the tobacco companies know about pairing drinking and smoking, and how did they link them in their marketing, if they did? Here's some examples of what we found. One is that tobacco advertising featuring alcohol, pretty easy to find. So this is an ad for Camel cigarettes, but you can see the people in the ad are drinking martinis or something. They also used to make alcohol flavored cigarettes. So these are Camel cigarettes that are flavored like a screwdriver or like gin. I don't know if they really tasted like gin. It sounds kind of disgusting to me, but it makes you curious, right? You want to know, does that cigarette really taste like gin? And that curiosity is very enticing to young people, right? So when the FDA started regulation of cigarettes in 2009, as Dr. Phil said, they got rid of alcohol flavors, fruit flavors, and candy flavors. They left menthol, they did get rid of these. The tobacco companies also did a lot of branded stuff. So free stuff is also now, branded stuff is also no longer legal. But before, they used to make things like Camel branded coolers. This is a Camel cooler thing, like a koozie. You used to be able to save up cigarette UPC symbols and then get things like Camel beer steins and other kinds of promotional items. This is an industry document. I mentioned that Philip Morris, maker of Marlboro, also owned Miller Beer. This is a internal document they had trying to say, I wonder if we could do promotions where if you bought beer, you could get a coupon for cigarettes, or the other way. If you bought cigarettes, you could get a coupon for beer. And Philip Morris also owned like Oscar Mayer hot dogs and other things. So they also thought maybe we could also do cross promotions between like our pickles or our barbecue sauce and give you cents off on on these tobacco products. So this is an example that they just mocked up saying, on our beer, we could have a coupon for cigarettes, or on our cigarettes, we could have a coupon for beer. And those kind of promotions, will reinforce the use of both products. So in summary, tobacco companies knew alcohol and tobacco are used together all the time. They also created all kinds of marketing strategies to reinforce that pairing. And the other thing is that a lot of these kind of adult marketing strategies have a lot of appeal to young people, right? They're useful. I do not have time to talk about this other paper, but this paper is basically about how the tobacco industry tried to fight taxes. And, when the tobacco taxes, obviously, if you're the tobacco company and you say tobacco taxes are bad, it's obviously self-interest. So this paper is about the tobacco industry trying to create a coalition of tobacco, of other businesses, tobacco, alcohol, oil, jewelry, candy, to together say tobacco taxes are bad. And their main partner in this, they wanted to get was the alcohol industry. They wanted the alcohol industry really to bankroll this, to fight against cigarette taxes. Turned out the alcohol industry was interested in pairing with tobacco companies, but they didn't really want to pay for it. So eventually, when they were allying with the alcohol industry to fight policy, the tobacco companies mostly bankrolled it. And anyways, this happened. I'm going to talk a little bit about new tobacco products, so I got to go fast. So these are old ads, right? You guys are probably not even born when these kinds of ads were on, right? But they show cigarettes with social activities, having fun, glamour, right? Music, lifestyle. You might be more familiar with this kind of advertising, right? These are all for vapes, right? But these are also social activities, glamour, lifestyle, flavors, youthful jokes. And this is kind of what we have in today's market. Even though alcohol-flavored cigarettes went away, you can still get alcohol-flavored vapes. And this is a picture of the kinds of vapes, right? This is actually getting kind of old. When I presented this to other students, they were like, those vapes are too old. That picture is 5 years old, which is true. But these are all vapes confiscated from high schools in California and North Carolina, right? Huge variety of products. Hard to tell, what's for marijuana and what is for nicotine, and they're evolving all the time. So when vapes first started, they looked like little cigarettes back in like 2009. Then they kind of became the pen style device, and they got bigger. These are box mods that have adjustable power, adjustable size. In 2018, there was a youth vaping epidemic driven by Juul, this device that you guys have probably seen. These are the Juul pods. And then nowadays, really these pod style devices have taken over the market. So there's lots of these disposable pod vapes. One of the innovations that happened, so Dr. Phil talked about how menthol increases the addictiveness of smoking cigarettes. The innovation that Juul did was they put benzoic acid in the liquid in the vapes. And the acid in the vapes makes it easier to inhale high concentrations of nicotine. So what used to be before, if you had a really strong vape and you inhaled it, it would burn, you would cough, it would taste bad. If you put acid into the liquid, it inhales really easily. So the vapes in the pod vapes are actually much stronger, and that allowed them to have high levels of nicotine and high concentrations. So on the left here, you've got a Juul pod. This is back in 2018, but the pods there contained about 200 puffs. And that was found to be about the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes, right? That's 200 puffs. Nowadays, like vapes like this on the right are more popular. These routinely have 3,000 puffs, 6,000 puffs, right? So if you do the algebra, a 6,000 puff vape has the amount of nicotine of a few cartons of cigarettes, right? You can keep it in your pocket. It costs less than 20 bucks online. So vapes are getting stronger and they're getting bigger, right? Here's Geek Bar. This is one of the most popular current vape brands. This is their Halloween promotion. We just had Halloween, right? These vapes, easily 7,500 puffs, 15,000 puffs. So huge amounts of nicotine. And this is very adult promotion, as you can see. In addition to the vapes, the tobacco companies are coming out with new stuff. This is a heated tobacco product. You can kind of see the bird sitting on it. So these heated tobacco products, the Philip Morris one that's going to be sold in the US is called IQOS. This is like you take a modified cigarette and you heat it in a heater almost to catching on fire, but not quite. And because it's not quite on fire, that's supposed to be safer. And it's called heated tobacco products. So they actually do have authorization in the US to sell this product and to say that it reduces your exposure to combustion products, right? Because anytime you lights up on fire, it's bad. So this is supposed to be safer. They had a patent dispute. So for a few years, it was off the market, but just last month, they've started marketing this in Austin, Texas. And Philip Morris actually sells this product all over the world already, especially Korea, especially Japan. And they're totally ready to do this. They market it kind of like the Apple Store, right? They will find fancy neighborhoods and put this next to the fancy clothing brands and have this very kind of clean look like electronics. On their social media, you'll see ads like this that feature flavors, colors, glamour, and concerts, lifestyle kinds of promotions. So all the tobacco playbook for cigarettes is coming back for these products too. Dr. Phil mentioned we would talk a little bit about pouches. How many of you guys have heard of Zins? You guys know that? Okay, so you guys this is a young audience. You already know, right? So these are nicotine pouches. This is kind of like the e-cigarette of the smokeless tobacco market, right? So chewing tobacco comes in these tins. You put it between your cheek and gum. And some versions of smokeless chewing tobacco come in little pouches, right? Like tea bags. These are pouches that are porous like tea bags, but they don't have any tobacco leaf inside. They just have nicotine and some binder, right? And you still put them in between your lip and gum, and the nicotine absorbs through your oral mucosa. You can see Zyn here. This is the most popular brand. They have huge advertising, a lot of it on social media. They also were embraced by like Tucker Carlson and the right and the Zinfluencers. But you can see the peppermint flavor here, which also helps with absorption. But every cigarette company has a vape brand. Every cigarette company has a pouch brand because they're just trying, as long as you're using nicotine, they're making money, right? So Velo is owned by RJ Reynolds, BAT, British American Tobacco. Zyn is owned by Philip Morris International now. On was owned by Altria. So these pouches are coming out. They are strong and they're getting bigger. We did an analysis of the marketing of the brands. They really emphasize that these are new and modern, even though smokeless tobacco is old and totally not modern. But the nicotine use is really emphasized as sort of safer, right? And they will say this is tobacco-free, this is smoke-free, this is vape-free. You can use it anywhere. The Zyn social media says you can hang out with your friends in Zyn. You can use it at work. You could use it while you're studying. Maybe the nicotine will like help you focus. And they also pair that one with alcohol too. Part of this is a process that we're calling pharmaceuticalization for the tobacco industry. What is pharmaceutical? It's basically tobacco companies saying we want to become like pharmaceutical companies. We did a study of this from the documents. This is Philip Morris 25 years ago saying, people are stopping smoking. What are we going to do? Right? Well, here's one solution. They said, we're going to transform ourselves from the leading cigarette company in the lower left here up to the upper right. We're going to be like a pharmaceutical company in the future, and we'll make nicotine like a medicine. This is a plan they did 25 years ago. If they are treated like a pharmaceutical company, we can normalize the use of nicotine. We can have new products that look more like medicines. They look clean. They don't look like dirty cigarettes. We could get the government to endorse us or recommend us or have insurance cover use of these products. And we can reframe the tobacco industry as part of the solution, right? Tobacco companies no longer merchants of death. Tobacco company, your partner in public health, promoting, safer nicotine products. That would be awesome. This is how British American Tobacco is framing this idea of normalizing nicotine. This is now 10 years old. They made this pamphlet explaining nicotine. And in the pamphlet, they say, you know what? In vapes or cigarettes, the nicotine is no more harmful than the caffeine in your cup of coffee, right? In 1988, when the Surgeon General's report came out and they said nicotine is as addictive as heroin or cocaine, the tobacco companies went crazy. They were like, no, we can't say it's like heroin or cocaine. We have to say it's like caffeine or chocolate. It's addictive like that. So the vapes have really given them an opportunity to say nicotine is just like caffeine. If you've talked to patients who have tried to struggle with addiction to heroin or cocaine, they will tell you it is easier to quit heroin or cocaine than to quit smoking. This is British American Tobacco's annual report. You can see they really feature these new products. These are heated tobacco products. This is their vape called Vipe. The new products really help them remake themselves, right? These are the annual reports from Philip Morris International and British American Tobacco featuring these heated tobacco products. When you look, again, this distracts people from cigarettes. In public health, this is actually really debated because some people say we should be promoting safer products. That's harm reduction. And so people fight about it. That's great for the tobacco companies. And also working with tobacco companies undermines strong policies. The Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which is the WHO's first international policy on tobacco, has a whole article that says do not work with tobacco companies. This goes directly against that. This is from BAT's annual report. You can see like they put this is their e-cigarette, this is their heated tobacco product, this is their pouch product, this is their smokeless tobacco product. They still have their cigarettes, but the cigarette brands are at the bottom and they're in black and white, they're really small. But if you look at the sales data from the report and you graph it like I did, you can see that basically almost all of their sales is still from cigarettes. So the focus on these new products is kind of a distraction, right? The money is still in the cigarettes. Okay, this is splitting the tobacco control community. So in the public health circles, people debate about harm reduction because harm reduction sounds like a good thing. It's a public health principle. And getting tobacco control people to fight with each other is good for tobacco companies. It also helps them argue that they've changed. Philip Morris International funds this foundation called the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World. Looks like a great idea. They got in trouble because people protested against this, so they renamed themselves Global Action to End Smoking. They put a doctor on the website. Unless you really know the tobacco industry is here, you look kind of crazy going against these guys, right? But this is like the kinder, gentler tobacco industry. So, people say harm reduction is a public health principle. I used to work in needle exchange, and I believe in needle exchange. I believe in harm reduction when it comes from the community, saying that this is a community movement, right? Needle exchange didn't come from the needle industry, saying we need to sell more needles, right? Promoting e-cigarettes is like saying we need to promote candy color. We need to give away candy flavored OxyContin at 7-Eleven because it's safer than heroin, right? It makes no sense. That's the e-cigarette argument. And when you say e-cigarettes are safer than cigarettes, well, cigarettes kill over 400,000 people a year, right? So e-cigarettes being safer is like a really low bar. So in any case, to summarize, tobacco companies are making lots of new nicotine products. The marketing is continuing as it always had. These are promoted as harm reduction, but the true motive is profit and legitimacy. And it's more important than ever for us to recognize, see the industry, and hold them accountable for their actions. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lane. Both of those presentations have left us with much to think about. It also appears that we have been manipulated, right? A lot of this I didn't know. And I was very surprised to see all of the new products as well. We're going to take a 10-minute break to allow our in-person folks to get some refreshments, and then we'll be back for Q&A. For those of you who've joined us via Zoom, please add your questions to the Q&A chat function. Thank you.
For our participants who are on Zoom, we will be starting back shortly. Any questions that you have for our panelists, please put your questions in the Q&A chat box. For our in-person participants, as you make your way back to your table the next couple of minutes, questions that you have for our participants, we have a microphone right there. You can get in line, and we will start off the questions in the next 3 minutes. So just carry on.
We just wanna party, but just go. We just wanna party, but just go. Just wanna party, but just wait. Right down there's just a prayer. We just wanna party, but just go. We just wanna party, but just go. I didn't even see that. Dance, you should play. Some got you slipping on. Got you slipping on. Slipping on.
Okay. Thank you again. And we are going to open it up for questions. And it looks like we have one person already with the mic first of all, he's trying to get the mic
Sure.
on.
Yeah, no, I just have to duck down.
Okay.
So,
Shoot.
my question, it's for both Dr. Gardiner and Dr. Ling, is the degree to which the vaping products are a gateway to the tobacco products. I mean, you showed how the tobacco products are really high, and then a little more comment on that controversy you brought up about how the public health community is a little split about the prevention. Any other thoughts about how to approach that, to think about it? So those are two questions.
There's a green light. Hello. Okay. So the vaping as a gateway, there are many longitudinal studies showing that youth who vape or who start vaping are between 3 and 4 times more likely to smoke cigarettes over time. So vaping among young people, no bueno, not good. And does seem to increase your chances of smoking cigarettes. The controversy about vaping in the public health community is that, especially if you work with older people who are trying to quit smoking, we're really desperate for something that will work to help people quit. And there are now randomized controlled trials that show, they're from outside the US, that show that vaping does have efficacy to help people quit smoking. And there are several trials compared to nicotine replacement where the vapes did better. Now, these are the old vapes. These are not like a geek bar, right? These are like older style vapes that are not available in the US. But in randomized controlled trial situations, like where everyone gets counseling, everyone is being supervised by a doctor and they have vaping as part of a plan to quit smoking, there is efficacy. If you look at the population-based studies of people, just in the world who are using vape like a consumer product, those studies show over time that those people using vapes are less likely to quit smoking. So there's a real difference, I think, in the products and life is really not like a randomized controlled trial. So, if you just go out to 7-Eleven and get something and do your best, and most of that's without counseling, I think vaping's unlikely to be helpful. But because there's some debate between people who say we need vapes, we should be promoting vaping because people are smoking, versus people, especially those who work with young people, who are saying we're concerned about vapes. We don't actually know the health effects. The new products come out with nobody testing them. And so the whole nation is being a big guinea pig. That's where the debate comes from. And, you can spend I've spent like a ton of meetings with people debating each other about, whether we should be for or against vapes. And meanwhile, the tobacco companies are just selling lots of cigarettes, blocking menthol. So that's my point of view on it.
The majority of people who use vapes to quit in a non-clinical situation become what we call dual users. They become users of cigarettes and e-cigarettes, or they become users of e-cigarettes in pouches, or cigarettes and, it's fine if you do have a, life, I think you said it well, it's not a clinical trial. If you can pick something up at the drugstore, it's the most addictive product we know in the world. It needs, people need help to do it. If there's the proper supervision, it's fine. If there's no supervision, it don't work.
I have a question while we wait on our folks from the audience for additional questions. When you hear the term Zen products, sounds like can I see show of hands? How many of you had heard of Zen products? Almost everybody, right? Maybe except for Silas. So with the exception of him. So, people kind of know this idea. I mean, you termed it the pharmaceuticalization. When you understand that and you see how the branding is changing to make it seem like a healthy product, something that, maybe help you study better. Maybe it helps you stay up longer and it looks clean, like you say. How do we think about changing this? I mean, this is sort of the strongest branding ever, as you kind of have mentioned. What do public health professionals do?
I think one of the things to do is the tobacco industry would actually really love to be in the background and invisible and silent about this. If you can say, look, the people making this stuff are the same people who are making the cigarettes. I think calling out the industry is one way you can fight against the fact that the products look, whenever the new products come out, people say they're revolutionary, they're modern, they're better. But the industry, the company selling it is the same company. And, people have said if tobacco companies are serious about harm reduction, they really want to be like nicotine pharmaceuticals, they should stop selling the cigarettes. They could decide that tomorrow, right? Just take those dirty products off the market and just sell safer products. They are far from doing that. So I think keeping a focus on the industry is one way to, to battle against the new products.
See, we have another question. I'm going to say something more about it, but please, ma'am, go ahead.
Should I ask it first, or do you want to say your comment?
Mhm.
Okay. I had a question for Pamela. So it's about like the pharmaceuticals too. You mentioned how like the nicotine companies, they want to go up to the pharmaceutical levels. But my question is, once they do that, wouldn't they be kind of like subjected to government input and also like the schedule classes? So wouldn't it be a good thing? So that way we can regulate it more with like schedule class like 1 or drug class 2. So it's like they have a limited amount of refills and prescriptions that they can write for that patient or that person who's using nicotine.
Yes, so I think, so tell me if I interpret your question right. So the question is like, if they actually became like pharmaceuticals, wouldn't we have more control over them like we do prescription medications?
Mhm.
And the whole thing with pharmaceuticalization is they're not actually getting approved as pharmaceutical. Like the tobacco companies are not putting vapes through the drug approval process to be tested and approved like drugs. They just wanted to make it seem like seems like it's pharmaceutical. So it's really a marketing thing where the products seem pharmaceutical, but they're actually just sold like tobacco products. That's why these vapes and these pouches can come on the market with no testing.
Mhm.
They're using the fact that they're tobacco products to get on the market. If they were actually going to go through, I mean, they could actually do randomized clinical trials and do all the things that like a drug company has to do to put a new drug on the market. The tobacco companies currently don't have to do that, and it's expensive. So if people can believe that they're pharmaceutical without having to do that work, that's what they're betting on. In Australia, they're just making a policy where you can only get vapes from pharmacies. And we'll see, these are the first country to do that. So we don't know how it's going to work, but we're watching.
I'm going to come at this somewhat circuitously. And I wanted to get back to Gail's question and I'll come back directly to what you said. People should be aware of the political implications around the Zen product. There's been a whole question of Zen influencers. I know it was mentioned in passing that Tucker Carlson was a big Zen promoter. I have a great video showing him running out to a helicopter and a can of Zen the size of a tire being brought down and him arguing that this amount of nicotine can change the world. It has become a thing among particularly white young men that this is a manly product, that if you use it, it's going to increase your virility. Problem with that argument is we know that nicotine constricts vessels. All the men in place take that into account. So there's been a push to politicize the whole use of this. It's even gotten to the point that Tucker Carlson now doesn't like Zen because Phillip, he put out all these things about what Zen's going to do. Philip Morris wrote a column and said, we don't say that about our project. He got mad. He's producing his own nicotine pouch called ALP, A-L-P, okay? And he says now people who use Zens are for girls and women. This is how outrageous things are become in this world. The pharmaceuticalization, I love that term, and toward the question that the lady asked. Things are very complicated. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, there are so many impacts on them from the tobacco industry and other industries that there's a way that they could become a pharmaceutical country and still produce the products they do. They produce cigarettes. So I wouldn't put my money on that, or at least I wouldn't put my money on that idea. Let me tell you how wild it is. When I did a study in 2016, we looked at the number of people in the White House. This is before Trump became president, when Obama was just going out. How many people worked for the tobacco industry were in the executive branch? There were 16 people who worked for the tobacco company was in the executive branch. Somebody said at the beginning of this that tobacco's in our DNA. This is what the United States was, is, and is, as she says, is going to be. We can't lose sight of that. We can't lose sight of it. How many lawyers are there now? I don't know how many lawyers there are now, but there were 16 then. I think there are even more now. Let me make one other point. In 2016, there was the deeming rules. When the FDA took over cigarettes, it didn't oversee any of the other tobacco products in 2009, just cigarettes. In 2016, they brought under their control all cigarette products, e-cigarettes, cigars, chews, all of that. In 2016, they wrote a paper, as well as the paper, it was part of the law. It was 16 pages long, arguing that all flavors should be removed from these products and menthol should be one of them. A tobacco lawyer who worked in the FDA, who edited that report, redlined everything having to do with menthol. And what you got produced is all the new products that came under the jurisdiction with all these new flavors, they all came in. Menthol stayed in. So I'm trying to let you know that the government is there's a fight going on between public health forces and the industry. We would like you to join the fight with us in the public health side. I'm going to stop preaching.
So there's a question that came from Zoom that is directly related to what Dr. Gardiner was talking about now. And so the question is, our participant wants to know if it is possible that the long delayed Fed law be enacted in the next month while we still have a Democratic Senate majority. What do you think the possibility of it being enacted?
That is the $64,000 question. This is going to be difficult for people to appreciate, but I'm going to go into it. And thank you for the question. When we sued these bad boys and girls in 2020, we dropped the lawsuit in 2022 because they said they would do something in 2023. And as I went through it, they never did anything. We refiled again in April of this year, and we even modified it in September of this year. They still didn't do anything. What is the chances that Biden would sign this into law? Or even Trump would sign it into law? The complication is this. The tobacco industry has given so much money to the Trump administration. A number of people in my field, in the public health field, are afraid that if he signs it into law, something called the Congressional Records Act, the CRA, will come into effect. The CRA says that if Congress hasn't met within 60 days of when the law was passed, and whatever that, they'll count it up, that they can get the majority of votes in the House, majority of votes in the Senate to squash the bill. And they do that and they send it to the president, who is Donald Trump. He will squash it. So some people are saying, well, maybe we should remove our lawsuit. Maybe we can hide it. I'm not sure how do we hide it, because yesterday, how many heard the Surgeon General yesterday? How many of you saw it? No one saw it. He was on Zoom. It was live. He called specifically for the banning of menthol. He said it twice in the course of his speech. What if now it becomes an issue? If it's not taken up the way we would like to see it taken up, this issue could be pushed back. Essentially, we'd have to go back to Congress. It would skip the FDA, but have to go back to Congress. We'd have to get a new authorization like we did in 2009. It would essentially end 15 years of fight that some of us have been involved in. So we're very, it's a difficult proposition. In fact, we're meeting, unfortunately, we're meeting daily to talk about what we do about that. We pressured him. He didn't do it. He said he was going to lose black votes. Then he doesn't run. Look, Kamala signed a letter when she was Attorney General in California and when she was a senator in support of banning menthol. She didn't say a word about it on the campaign trail because she knew she took the same logic that what's his name? So what Biden did. It's a great question, but there's not a great answer. I just say, as my Portuguese brothers and sisters would say, a luta continua. And regardless if we go forward with it, if we drop it, we can still work at the state and work at the local level to get these things done. I'm starting.
Well, that's another great segue into a question that's come up related to what we can do as public health practitioners, clinicians, and community members to counteract the tobacco industry's advertising in vulnerable communities. So, I mean, a lot of this I think some of us were aware of, some of us were not. When you showed just the red, I mean, I didn't know how influenced I personally was to know the brand, but also all of the other advertising. So what can we do? What are some of the suggestions? You know, maybe this needs to be more of a grassroots movement since vulnerable populations are being targeted.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Dr. Phil was just talking about how even if things don't happen at the national level, things at the local level could still happen. And we know in tobacco control that actually, like all the best stuff, all the best, strongest policies usually start at the local level, right? So actually working within communities to say, look at my neighborhood, look at the tobacco advertising in my neighborhood, in this part of my town, those can actually be super powerful. And there are things happening around, getting rid of tobacco retailers, that are concentrated in certain neighborhoods. A lot of times getting rid of, we found that when San Francisco got rid of flavored products, so San Francisco was one of the first cities to get rid of menthol and other flavored tobacco products. When those products were taken off the shelves, which they did very effectively, the advertising for the products also went away too. And the bill wasn't about getting rid of advertising. It's hard to pass advertising bills in the US, right, because of free speech. But getting rid of the product meant that advertising went down a lot because I guess why advertise for something you can't buy? So I do think, right now there are different local policies happening around making people have a license to sell tobacco products, limiting the number of licenses, then you have penalties if people are not complying with policies. And a lot of that I think we're going to end up saying we need to concentrate on what happens in our local communities to fight against advertising or these bad products being in your local store. And then if I do it in my town, then Dr. Phil looks over and says, oh, if she did it over here, we can do it over here. And that series of small local actions ends up being really powerful. It's how it has been really worked in tobacco control before.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate the question and your explanation, Dr. Ling. And I just did want to make an announcement that the city of Vallejo is actually in the process of enacting a very comprehensive, what we call tobacco retail license ordinance. So it hasn't passed just yet. They have to have one more vote. But this policy will officially make all tobacco retailers have a tobacco retailer license so that we can track all of the people that are selling tobacco products in the city. It will outlaw the sale of tobacco at pharmacies. So your local CVS, Walgreens, you won't be able to purchase tobacco products there. You will not be able to redeem any tobacco coupons. You won't be able to place a tobacco retailer within 1,000 feet of any youth-oriented facility. And there are several other really great points that this policy adds on. And so part of my job with Dr. Gardiner here is to go city by city and help them pass these policies that really do strengthen California's state law, which outlaws flavored tobacco. So I hope to see maybe some of you at the next meeting. I think they would really appreciate public health students coming to speak on this issue.
Thank you, Camille.
Apparently there is another reading. This is from, it looks like Joseph Hayden from on Zoom. It says that it passed unanimously in front of City Council, but there is a second reading on December 10th if you
Exactly.
students would like to be present for that reading.
I think Camille can give that information to Dr. Cummings, and she can provide that information to folks. Let me give some challenges in this regard. This is going to be a little bit disruptive, but it's very important. There's a bill that passed that the governor refused to veto that is going to allow marijuana lounges to exist in California. You have to realize that it has been in the late 90s, almost 30 years since we got smoking out of bars and restaurants. With the introduction of the lounges, you're essentially bringing smoke back into the public sphere. I'm a tobacco scientist. Smoke is smoke, whether it's marijuana, whether it's tobacco, whether it's a forest fire or burning leaves in the garage. Those are called biomasses. And biomasses produce the same chemicals when they burn. Some have different active ingredients in it, like THC on the one hand or nicotine on the other hand, but they all produce carcinogens. Smoking indoors is bad and it exposes other people. The greatest problem that we've done in California, and I know I've done a lot of work, is we allowed, when we got rid of menthol in California, we left hookah and hookah bars open. And hookah's even more dangerous for you than cigarettes, given the amount of carbon monoxide that is produced in terms of that. Okay, that's the bad news. The good news is that Oregon is set this year to bring before their state legislature a bill to remove menthol from the marketplace. Washington State is also in the same process. There are cities around the country, including Cleveland, Ohio, New York City, Buffalo, that are in play in terms of the fight around menthol. It's not intellectual question. I went to college just like you, but if we want to change the world, we have to be change agents. It can be done with writing. It can be done attending city council meetings. I'm glad that she raised that. It can be done by getting out on the stump and proselytizing like some of us are doing. So very good, Gail. We've developed this thing called the menthol funeral, where we get a coffin and we make it look like a menthol cigarette box. And you can either put pictures of loved ones in there or old cigarette packages in there, and actually have a funeral procession and go to a church or to an altar. In January of this year, we did it in front of the White House. We had a good 250 people there, and we called out Biden to do something about it. It's the menthol funeral. There's also the menthol poetry slams, where we have artists come together with spoken word and talk about the harms of menthol and the need to get it out of the community. So there are many ways to fight this fight. It's not just one way. Anyways, thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, I think this is really important because, you can be actually very creative, right? To fight this fight. And, if there's a hearing on this on December 10th, You guys came out here for pizza, right? And snacks. Like if this many young people showed up at the hearing, the people would pay attention. It is very rare. It's very rare to have scientists come to the city council, but it's also super rare to have young people. And even if you don't feel that young, you're young enough to make the policymakers pay attention. And young people just saying, you know, what you feel about this, how it affects your community, why this is important to do. That's actually very compelling. And you have the opportunity just, you know, a few weeks from now to make a difference in this in Vallejo. I would say if you're inspired about this, like make a commitment to go down there on December 10th. If it's public. Yeah.
No, I was looking and there aren't any questions, but there were a couple of comments and co-signing both Dr. Ling and Gardner that smoke is smoke. And unfortunately, I guess there are some other battles that you couldn't cover everything that Oakland City Council made an exemption for smoke-free multi-unit housing for cannabis. So people are allowed to smoke cannabis, but not cigarettes.
It's when we got the laws passed around legalization of marijuana, you don't want to smoke in apartment buildings. Again, there's still the secondhand smoke, but it's illegal in California to walk down the street and smoke a joint. So what do people do? If you live in multi-unit housing, which more poor people and colored people do, then they become the target. We need to change the laws such that people can do that. Or from a public health point of view, once that we decriminalize marijuana, we now need to denormalize the use of it. It's not better for you. It's just differently wrong. Okay. Indeed. Okay.
I've been on this task force looking at high potency marijuana. So just like we talked about how nicotine vapes are getting bigger and stronger, right? The same is actually true in the cannabis market, right? Every year since the 70s, cannabis is getting more and more potent. And then the concentrates and the vapes for cannabis, you know, like now you like buying weed in California is sort of like, and everything is like high potency, 25 to 35%. Concentrates can have up to 99% THC in them. And those are what's used to make edibles and what's used to make the cannabis vapes. Across the board, the cannabis vapes are getting more and more powerful. And the experts in cannabis say that like the more frequently you use and the higher potency, the more adverse effects you have from cannabis, right? The more likely you're going to have mental health effects, the risk of psychosis, the risk of the vomiting syndrome from the use, or if you use every day. There's like right now, no public health, no messaging about high potency. Everyone thinks high potency means more high quality. And so the market is really getting more and more strong. And what we really need to do is have the same kind of approach we did to tobacco, where it's legal, but it's not encouraged. That kind of framework needs to be brought to cannabis, which is right now still very much like we need to make as much money as we can, as the sort of philosophy around it. But there are a lot of parallels that we need to be paying attention to with cannabis legalization.
So I know we have lots of students here, and I'm remembering back to my student days, too many years ago to say, but and I think it took several decades to realize that there are different ways to have public health changes happen. Education is one. Another one is appealing to altruism. You might try to use financial incentives to make changes happen. And reframing is a critical one. What does society feel is normal, and sort of changing what societal's expectations. And then there's policy. You can't start with policy, because if you don't have those other things on board, the policy will never never be passed. But I think this is the issue with tobacco is a case study in that mixture of different ways to try to influence, make big changes. And some of them, there's a sequence of which ones you do first versus others. But I wanted to, especially since you're both experts in looking at this over long term, just reflect upon those different mechanisms and how they fit together in this work against the tobacco industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we think about tobacco control in California, it has been a combination of things like, California's had a good tobacco control program in part because we had a policy, right? We had a 25-cent tax passed in the 90s. That meant that there was consistent funding for a tobacco control program over decades. The 80s, okay, see, Bill remembers better than I do. I'm like, that was back I was still in high school. But consistent funding for a tobacco control program has made a huge difference. It's why California is probably one of the leading states, if not the leading state, one of the leading places in the world in tobacco control because we've had sustained funding, right? The California Tobacco Control Media Campaign has been very, very important. And again, creating an environment and creating norms that then allow policies to happen, right? And the California Media Campaign focused on calling out the tobacco industry, right? The first ads showed tobacco executives sitting around a table and laughing and figuring out how they could keep selling the stuff to, poor people and people of color and dumb smokers. That was the centerpiece of a lot of the media campaign ads, was saying this is, smoking isn't about people making bad choices. Don't blame the smoker, blame the industry who's responsible for this. The media campaign also did a lot of education on the dangers of secondhand smoke, right? People thought secondhand smoke is okay. The education about secondhand smoke then set up California being able to pass clean indoor air laws, right? So now people feel like nobody smokes in California, right? People would not light up a cigarette in here, maybe a joint, but not a cigarette in here, maybe hopefully not a joint. But that feeling like it's totally weird to smoke a cigarette inside comes from the policy environment in California. But that happened because we had good public education about secondhand smoke. Those are just two examples, but I think, in California, we've had sort of a sequence, right? Some policies and then at public education that changes norms. So now so people will say no one smokes in California anymore. That's a social norm thing, which can then lead to like the new policies, right? Which is like, get rid of the sales of commercial tobacco.
It's interesting to me, you folks are college students. I know that some of you have tried marijuana. I know that some of you have probably tried a Zen. I'm almost certain some of you have tried an electronic cigarette. I think the struggle is how do you avoid getting addicted? And it's very hard to avoid that. It's very hard. I see a number of people smiling as I look around the room. This is about that right. This is so much about you, but it's about. This isn't so much about no. This isn't so much about you, but it's about our future, about our children, about the next generation coming up, and the legacy that we can have in dealing with this situation. So think about that as we're leaving here tonight, that we may have been exposed to this product, but we can help others get away. And I think Pamela's right that both policy and education and personal interaction, all of these things are necessary to move this process forward. I see you walking up, sir.
Thank you. I'm a kid of the 70s and 80s, and with pictures, you just made me reflect on. I remember seeing those pictures in Jet and Ebony, and part of that piece also. I was a woman talking to my parents, and my mom said in the 60s they were just passing out cigarettes. So that was just giving people an opportunity to get hooked or just the addiction pieces. So that just stood out to me, and that was historically Black colleges and universities. So that just raised a point when you talk about college and how this is over 50 or 60 years. There have been specific targets in the different communities. Yeah.
I want to make your point even stronger. I lived in New York City in 1979, 1980, 81, 82, doing political work. I've been in the work for a long time. I lived in Brooklyn and worked in Harlem and would take the subway, into work. Come up out of the subway, and they're blaring music, James Brown, over the loudspeaker and giving cool cigarettes away. I was a cool cigarette smoker then. There was no way, a free pack of cigarettes, that's not even an issue. They've been giving them away for you. Let me even deepen your point. In Ebony, it wasn't until 1976 that they began to run ads other than for menthol products. Prior to that, all the ads were for menthol products in Ebony. David, you want to wipe it off, how bad that it's been. But you make a good point, and I appreciate it. So.
Yeah, so I have to add my own marketing stories then. So, my mom loves coupons, right? She will drive across town to use a 50-cent coupon. My mom did a couple of things. One was she forced my dad to quit smoking, right? My dad is a Chinese man, right? 60% smoking prevalence in China, came to this country smoking cigarettes. My mom basically forced him to quit smoking. And that's probably why he outlived his younger brother, who died of tobacco-related esophageal cancer. My father is a physician. My mom took the no smoking signs from his office and put them in our house, like in the 80s. And I was like, oh, this is so inhospitable. When the doctors come over, they're smoking cigarettes, and now we're not going to let them smoke in the house. So she was very much ahead of her time with the anti-smoking. But like the first address book I ever had was like a little black book. It was a Virginia Slim's little black book. And my mom got that free address book. And even though she's very anti-smoking, she was like, here, you giving it to her like teenage kid. It's free. So I was exposed to all these Virginia Slims ads as a teenager because, my mom, though she was very anti-smoking, like could not pass up on the free stuff. And, and the tobacco companies still give like lots of free samples, lots of coupons. People all get on the mailing list or they download the apps for the free coupons. People feel like giving those away is like giving away money, makes it really hard to quit. So this, some of these marketing things started in the 50s and 60s, continued on and through the 70s and 80s, and still continue today. They're really hard to stop here.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, I won't belabor the point, but those of us of a certain age, I'm looking at Deirdre and as well as that comment. Yeah, this is a part of our DNA as being American citizens, and the Jet magazines for sure. They came every week. We looked at them every week, and of course, we went to all the cool concerts. The cool jazz festivals. I mean, we did all of that. Under with the understanding that those were, the products that were important in our communities. So with that, I just want to thank both Drs. Ling and Dr. Gardiner for this incredible conversation that is helping us commemorate our 10-year anniversary in the social justice series. This has been a wonderful evening. I've learned a lot. I also want to recognize my daughter and my grandson who were just here, and they're just, they're back. Hello. I went to school with Dr. Phil. I was a master's student. He was in a doctoral program at UC Berkeley, and he came here. And then my daughter now works with Dr. Phil. It's a very incestuous group of people, but for good reason. Really appreciate, this work, the work that you both do, and really contributing to health equity here, not just here in the Bay Area, across the country. And I know, Dr. Ling, you've done a lot of global work too that we didn't actually get to talk about. So we might have to bring you both back for another conversation. But really do appreciate your attention, your contributions. We know it's a rainy evening, been here all day long, but we want to appreciate you celebrating with us today and thanking our Sharon Chesney from the Public Health Program, who has been such a lifesaver for making sure that you are all here, decorations, and on and on. Thank you, Sharon. Couldn't do this work without you.
This series and these two. So I am.
Thank you so much. And IT and advancement, thank you all for being here. And for all of our community partners and friends, thank you for joining us tonight and supporting our students and our public health program. Have a great evening, be safe, and we'll see you next time.
And do not leave without taking food with you.
Hello. Welcome, everyone, to the 10th Annual Social Justice Speaker Series. We're going to start our webinar and live in-person sessions shortly. So until then, enjoy your pizza. It looks like the folks in front of us have pizza, and we'll begin our presentation shortly. Thank you.